Chaos erupts. Gunfire echoes through the halls of a crowded high school. While terrified students run for their lives, a quiet black girl hears a faint cry for help from the shadows. As everyone else flees to safety, she turns toward the danger, toward the very girl who once made her feel small. And that day, in the heart of terror, an invisible girl became a symbol of courage. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. It was one of those spring mornings in Georgia when the air still clung to the cold, stubborn as an old grudge, though sunlight streamed generously through the windows of Hamilton High. The school stood like a fortress of order in the mostly white suburb of Stonebridge, a town that smiled wide but blinked slow when it came to seeing people like her. The bell rang and the hallways came alive. Sneakers squeaked, lockers slammed, and conversations floated overhead like balloons without strings. Teenagers flowed like a current, effortless and loud, leaving behind the quiet girl who walked in the opposite direction. Alone, deliberate, as though she were navigating a storm, invisible to everyone else. Amira Lewis, 16, skin the shade of rich earth after rain, moved like someone used to being overlooked. She carried a stack of library books tight against her chest, not for protection, though it served as armor, but because she didn't know where else to put her hands. Every movement was calculated, not from fear, but from experience. When you've been judged before you speak, you learn to make yourself small in spaces that don't want you to grow. Her hair was neatly braided back, her shoes were clean, her eyes, dark, deep, quietly alert, swept the floor as if it held more safety than any face in the hallway. She didn't blend in. No, Amira never blended. She was ignored, which is not the same thing. To be ignored, you must first be noticed and then dismissed. Outside the chemistry lab, Chloe Sanders leaned against the lockers, her laughter sharp, effortless, and glossy like a magazine cover. Blonde curls, polished nails, a voice trained in confidence. Her eyes flicked toward Amira like one might glance at a fly that dared pass too close. "There goes our little ghost," Chloe murmured to her friend, just loud enough. "Always floating. Doesn't she creep you out a little?" Amira didn't break stride. She didn't speak, but the edge of her mouth tightened like someone holding back something bitter on their tongue. Her hands gripped the books harder, the leather cover pressing into her palm like a bruise yet to bloom. She didn't stop, didn't confront. She never did, because in places like Hamilton High, the cost of speaking up when you looked like her was always higher. She kept walking, past Chloe, past the boys who never remembered her name, past the posters about kindness plastered on bulletin boards, mocking in their brightness. 2 years ago, Amira tried to join the debate team. She'd walked into the room with a spine full of hope and a heart full of words. But they'd asked her, "Are you sure you belong here?" Not unkindly, just amused, as if she'd wandered into the wrong movie. After that, she spoke less, did more, read everything Baldwin ever wrote, helped the janitor stack chairs after assemblies, spent her lunches in the library where no one looked through her because no one looked at all. That morning she returned the fire next time to the third shelf from the bottom, section 320. The librarian wasn't in yet. She ran her fingers along the spine one last time before sliding it home. In the reflection of the glass, her face stared back, unflinching, unreadable. The face of someone who had grown too used to silence. As the bell for second period rang, Amira stepped into the hallway. The wave of students swept around her like a river bends around a stone. She flowed with it, neither part of the current nor entirely separate. A girl dropped her water bottle. Another boy shoved past. Somewhere behind, Chloe's voice again, laughing now, at someone else maybe, or maybe still at her. But Amira didn't turn. Her chin stayed forward, posture calm, every breath controlled. Dignity in restraint, strength in quiet. The morning had unfolded like any other. A pop quiz in chemistry, the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the steady rhythm of pencils scratching against lined paper. Room 204 sat on the east wing of Hamilton High. A long, narrow space with tall windows and faded motivational posters peeling slightly at the corners. Miss Gallagher, their teacher, paced slowly between rows, murmuring reminders about balancing equations, while students, some focused, others faking it, kept their heads down. Amira Lewis sat near the back, quiet as usual, her pen gliding in clean loops over her worksheet. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't whisper to neighbors, but her ears were always open, attuned to every shift in tone, every click of a door latch, every whisper too sharp to be innocent. Years of being overlooked had made her a master of observation. The second it happened, it was just sound, no warning, no preamble, a single sharp crack, then another. Not thunder, not a locker slammed. This was different, deeper, closer, more final. The room froze. For half a second, it was as if the air itself held its breath. Then everything fractured. Someone screamed. Miss Gallagher dropped her clipboard, her voice rising over the chaos. "Get down! Get down!" Desks scraped violently across the floor as students scrambled, ducked, shoved, shouted. A chair toppled. The fire alarm shrieked, not because it was triggered, just someone in desperation smashing the glass in the hallway. The middle of the panic, Amira's body moved before her mind could catch up. Her books slid to the ground as she ducked low, scanning for cover, heart pounding in her throat. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her instincts, honed not in war but in the slow suffocation of being underestimated, told her one thing: find somewhere they won't look. Around her, students pushed past each other like animals fleeing a wildfire. In the blur of limbs and panic, she saw Chloe, shining, cruel, untouchable Chloe, being swept backward by the stampede. A body knocked into her hard, another stepped on her leg. Chloe fell, then screamed, a raw cracking sound, and did not rise. Her foot twisted beneath her at a wrong angle, her face contorted in shock and pain as students leapt over her without stopping. Amira didn't have time to process it. She turned down the side corridor, away from the surge, away from room 204, her breath shallow, her skin slick with cold sweat. The hallway outside the music room was strangely quiet, a pocket of stillness in a building drowning in fear. Her eyes darted around. There, the utility closet, always unlocked. She slipped inside, pulling the door gently behind her. Dark, musty, a faint chemical smell clung to the mop handles and stacked chairs. She crouched behind a shelf of unused cymbals and let her heartbeat roar in her ears. Her hands trembled, not from fear, she refused to name it that, but from the reality. This was happening. In her school. Not a headline, not a distant city. Here, in the same halls where she'd been ignored yesterday. She tried to slow her breathing, her back pressed to the wall, her knees ached. But she stayed still, alive. For a moment nothing moved, but then, faint, muffled. Not screaming, whimpering. A pained sound, familiar. She didn't want to move, didn't want to be seen, but something tugged her forward. She cracked the door open, just a sliver. The hallway shimmered in the red haze of emergency lights, and there, no more than 15 feet away, lay Chloe. Alone, curled, clutching her leg. No one else in sight. Just Chloe, whimpering like a wounded animal, eyes darting, mouth forming words Amira couldn't hear. And in that terrible, suspended moment, two truths collided inside her. This was the same girl who once laughed as Amira dropped her tray in the cafeteria, who called her the shadow loud enough for others to laugh. And this was also a human being. Hurt, helpless, forgotten. Amira stared, frozen at the threshold between safety and something much more dangerous, compassion. And though her body ached for stillness, her soul chose movement. Amira hesitated at the threshold of the darkened hallway, her hand still resting on the door frame of the supply closet she had just left. The dim red glow of the emergency lights cast long shadows across the floor, making the scene before her look like something from a bad dream. And there, caught in the silence and the flickering hum of the building's panic, was Chloe, the same Chloe whose voice had so often sliced through the air like a blade, now reduced to a trembling heap of pain and confusion. She was crumpled near the trophy case, her leg bent unnaturally beneath her, one shoe missing, mascara streaked across her cheeks, not from vanity, but from the raw sting of helplessness. Her hands clutched at her thigh, and her mouth opened and closed in whispers Amira couldn't hear. There was no audience now, no friends, no laughter, no cruelty to shield behind. Only pain. Amira stood frozen, her breath shallow. 1,000 thoughts surged in the span of seconds, each one laced with memories. The cafeteria tray Chloe had knocked from her hands sophomore year with a faux smile and a careless oops. The time Chloe had mimicked her accent in front of others, drawing chuckles like coins in a cup. The moments she was talked over, looked through, erased. All while Chloe stood at the center of it all like a sun no one dared question. Her feet ached to retreat. She could disappear again, slide back into silence, pretend she never saw. After all, no one would believe she was here. No one ever really saw her anyway. But the moan that escaped Chloe's lips just then, low, real, almost childlike, cut through the resentment like a blade through cloth. It wasn't the sound of someone entitled. It wasn't the voice of the girl who laughed when Amira dropped her books. It was the sound of someone hurting. Alone, left behind. Amira swallowed hard. Her body moved before she gave it permission. She crossed the hallway in swift, quiet steps and crouched beside her. Chloe's eyes fluttered open, glazed but wide. For a moment they stared at each other, two girls on opposite sides of an invisible wall. Chloe's lips trembled. I can't move, she choked out, her voice small, cracked. Amira didn't answer. She didn't glare, didn't gloat. She simply nodded, then hooked one arm under Chloe's shoulders, the other beneath her knees, and began to lift. Chloe let out a gasp as her leg shifted. "Wait, no, my foot!" But Amira only said, gently but firmly, "Hold on. I got you." Step by painful step, Amira half-dragged, half-carried Chloe down the corridor toward the music room. Each movement was measured, cautious. Her arms shook from the strain, but her grip didn't loosen. The door to the room creaked open, and she guided Chloe inside, easing her down onto the old piano bench in the far corner, behind a stack of music stands and faded sheet. The room smelled of old wood and brass polish, the air still as if holding its breath with them. Amira scanned the space. There, an overturned cello case, a snapped drumstick, some rolls of gaffer tape. She moved quickly, quietly, improvising. She tore a strap from a folding chair, used a ruler and a broom handle as a makeshift splint. Chloe whimpered once as Amira straightened her leg. "It's broken," Chloe said, her voice tight. Amira didn't argue. She didn't speak at all. With slow precision, she wrapped the splint in place with a belt of torn cloth. Her hands moved with steady resolve. This wasn't a girl reacting. This was someone choosing. Choosing dignity over pettiness, choosing mercy over memory. When she finished, she sat back, brushing her braids behind one ear. Chloe looked at her, eyes wide, blinking against tears. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, voice fragile, almost accusing. Amira didn't meet her gaze. She just said softly, "Because someone had to." And with that she stood, crossed to the door, and slid the heavy upright piano gently across the threshold, creating a barricade between them and the unknown. They would wait. In silence. In the dark, but not in fear. The room held its breath. Every creak of the wooden floor beneath their weight, every tick of the old wall clock above the blackboard felt deafening in the stillness. Dust floated in the thin stream of emergency light that crept through the window blinds, casting a faint red hue over the music stands and instruments scattered about like a battlefield left mid-rehearsal. Chloe sat with her back against the wall, teeth clenched, breath shaky. Amira crouched beside the door, eyes fixed on the crack between the frame and the floor, every muscle taut, her body a wire strung too tight. Outside, the hallway groaned. A footstep, not hurried but slow, measured, heavy. Then another. Then silence. Amira raised her hand without turning, a flat warning in the air. Chloe's breath hitched, and for a moment she looked like she might speak, might sob, might unravel. But Amira turned just enough to meet her eyes, and in that look was something steady and fierce. Without words it said, "You will survive this, but only if you are silent." Chloe pressed both hands to her mouth and nodded, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes, her shoulders trembling. The steps returned, closer now. Amira shifted low to the ground, wedged between the piano and the wall, eyes darting across the room for shadows, exits, anything. Her mind moved fast if they came in, if the door gave way, if she had to fight or flee. She had no plan except one, keep Chloe alive. Outside something clattered, a sound too deliberate, too sharp to be accidental. A chair, a locker handle, and then a bang. Not a gunshot. Something wooden falling. The hallway fell still again, and then came the sound that turned their blood cold. A hand, testing the door handle. Amira surged forward on instinct, wedging the piano tighter against the door. Her fingers moved quickly, finding a trumpet case nearby, shoving it underneath like a wedge. Her movements made no sound. She had learned how to move, unseen, unheard. Her silence now was a shield. The handle jiggled. Once, then again, then stopped. Chloe, behind her, let out a muffled sob. Amira turned, her index finger to her lips, the other hand gently motioning Chloe to tuck herself lower beneath the stack of folded music stands. Chloe obeyed without hesitation, her face pale, her usual sharp edges melted into pure, unfiltered fear. A pause. Footsteps again. Fading this time. The floorboards no longer protested with each step, just the hum of tension pressing in from every direction. For long minutes they remained still, counting each breath. Every few seconds Amira glanced at the door, then at Chloe, then back again, her jaw clenched, her spine straight. Not because she wasn't afraid, she was, but because in that moment she was the only one left to hold fear back from swallowing them both. Finally, the intercom crackled faintly. A distorted voice far off said something unclear, then another pop of static. But it was enough. Enough to know someone was still out there. Enough to know time was still moving forward, even if they felt trapped in an hour that refused to end. Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do you think they're gone?" Amira didn't respond right away. Her ears strained for any noise, any hint of return. Then she shook her head slightly. "Not yet," she whispered. Her voice low, anchored, firm. They would wait, as long as it took. Because in that tiny, barricaded room, amid broken instruments and shattered illusions, silence was survival. Time collapsed into itself inside the music room. Minutes bled together like spilled ink, smearing the boundary between hope and dread. The silence, once a shield, now became unbearable, too thick, too sharp, every second stretched thin like a string about to snap. Amira remained by the door, her posture unwavering, though her muscles ached and her lips had long since gone dry. Chloe, curled behind the music stands, had stopped trembling, not because the fear was gone, but because the body can only panic for so long before it shuts down and goes quiet. Then, faint at first, came the echo of boots, many of them, moving in tandem. A commanding voice shouted clear, steady commands. Radios crackled. The metallic click of doors being pried open one by one drew closer like waves approaching the shore. Someone pounded on the music room door. "Police! Open up!" Amira didn't move immediately. Her mind still wrestled with doubt. Was it real? A trick? A trap? But Chloe stirred behind her. "It's them," she said, her voice hoarse. "We're safe now." Amira nodded once, stood, and pulled the trumpet case from the base of the piano. With effort, she slid the heavy instrument away from the door. The hinges creaked as it opened slowly, revealing the hard outlines of 3 uniformed officers in bulletproof vests, rifles lowered but ready. Behind them a medic pushed forward. "Two here," one of the officers called into his radio. "One injured, one unarmed." Chloe whimpered as the EMTs reached her. "Her leg," Amira said simply. No panic, no rush, just the information that needed to be known. The medic examined the makeshift splint and raised his eyebrows, surprised. "You did this?" he asked. Amira gave a small nod. He didn't say thank you, just turned to Chloe and began working. As they lifted Chloe onto the stretcher, Amira stepped back without being asked. She watched as they braced the leg, adjusted the straps. Chloe's eyes found hers for a brief moment, uncertain, unreadable. But she didn't speak. Amira didn't expect her to. She did. When they wheeled Chloe down the hallway, Amira followed behind, at a distance. The halls were littered with abandoned backpacks, trampled notebooks, a broken phone screen flickering in the middle of the floor like a ghost. Officers swept room by room, guiding students out in slow clusters. News cameras waited beyond the exit like vultures circling a field not yet cold. Outside, the world was already moving on. Helicopters above, reporters asking questions, names of teachers, police officers, student witnesses being scribbled onto press cards. Chloe's stretcher disappeared into the back of an ambulance. Her parents weren't there yet, but a policewoman stayed by her side. Amira stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her skin, damp with sweat, now prickled in the morning chill. No one noticed her. No one asked her name. One officer glanced at her, then walked past. The camera crew angled around her, not through her. She was not the story. She never was. The headlines came fast. Tragedy at Hamilton High. Heroic response from teachers and police. Student injured in stampede survives. The news anchors wore solemn faces. The community candlelight vigil was announced before sunset. Chloe's name was mentioned, her condition, her courage. Amira's was not. At home, her mother sat frozen on the couch, the television blaring the local channel. A hand clutched over her mouth. When Amira walked in, her mother stood, rushing toward her, arms wrapping her tight. "You're safe," she whispered. "You're safe." Amira held her, but her eyes stared past the living room walls, beyond the anchor's voice, past the news scroll that never once said Amira Lewis. That night she sat on the edge of her bed, the world still humming with aftermath. She wasn't angry, she wasn't even surprised. She was just quiet. Like always. The gymnasium was draped in silence. Rows of folding chairs filled the space where pep rallies were once held, now lined with candles, flowers, and photos of the day no one could forget. A week had passed since the shooting. The air still carried its echo. Teachers sat with solemn faces. Parents clutched tissues. The mayor gave a practiced speech about resilience. The principal thanked law enforcement. Everyone applauded politely, each clap a brittle echo of gratitude forced through grief. Then came the final name on the program, Chloe Sanders. No one expected much. She was the wounded girl, the survivor with the broken leg, a name already etched into the press, a face familiar from news clips. They thought they'd hear gratitude, maybe a few tears, then applause. What they didn't expect was what followed. Chloe stepped onto the stage slowly, one crutch under her arm, her free hand shaking slightly. She paused at the microphone. Her voice, when it came, was soft, strained, but unwavering. "I'm standing here not because I was brave," she began, her gaze lowered, "but because someone else was." The crowd stilled. Her eyes scanned the faces in the room, finally landing on one figure seated near the back. Amira, quiet, still, and nearly hidden, as always. Chloe took a breath. "There's someone in this room I never treated right. Someone I ignored, mocked, and pushed aside. And when I was hurt, alone, and terrified, she didn't hesitate. She came back for me." She blinked rapidly, swallowed hard. "Amira Lewis saved me. She saved my life, and I didn't even say thank you." Gasps rippled through the crowd, heads turned. Amira stiffened in her seat, heart suddenly too large for her chest. I need to say this where everyone can hear, Chloe continued, voice rising slightly. She is not invisible. She is not forgettable. She is the reason I'm here. She turned toward the back. Amira, please, will you come up here? For a moment, no one breathed. Then Amira stood. Her steps were slow, not from fear, but from disbelief, as if each movement risked waking her from a dream. She walked past rows of eyes that had never met hers before. Chloe extended her hand. Amira took it. Together they stood at the center of a stage that had never been meant for her. The applause began hesitantly, then built, louder and louder, until it filled the entire gymnasium like thunder finally catching up to lightning. People stood, teachers wiped their eyes. Amira didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was the statement. For the first time, she was seen. The video of Chloe's speech spread quickly, first on local pages, then on national news. Anchors quoted her words, students made tribute videos, hashtags emerged. Amira Lewis, real hero, say her name. For the first time, Amira's name was said not in passing, not in whispers, but with weight. A week later, Amira was called to City Hall. She didn't wear anything fancy, just a clean white blouse and her best shoes. But when she stepped into the council chamber, every official stood in her honor. The mayor read a proclamation declaring March 18th, Amira Lewis Day, honoring her courage, her composure, her compassion. They asked if she wanted to speak. She hesitated only a moment, then walked to the podium. Her voice was quiet but steady. I didn't save Chloe because I liked her, she began, eyes steady on the crowd. I did it because no one deserves to be left behind. Not in a hallway, not in a classroom, not in life. There was a pause. The silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It was full, brimming with respect. And maybe, she added, we should start seeing people before they save us. When she stepped down, the applause was no longer just for a girl who had survived. It was for a girl who had changed them. And outside, as cameras flashed and microphones reached for her, Amira simply looked up at the sky, soft gray and quiet, and exhaled. Not from fear, from release. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.